Hey guys, Tim King with RCGroups.com. Here today to talk to you a little bit about the new FrSky Tandem X20. This is FrSky's latest radio. Pretty nice piece of equipment. I've been a FrSky fan and user since the original Tyrannus came out, and I have just been impressed with the quality of the hardware and the user friendliness of it. And I know a lot of people are going to question me saying that. FrSky hardware typically runs on OpenTX, and it does have a learning curve, but it's just incredibly powerful. It's something I really enjoy. Having said that, I've also used FrSky radios on their own software, and have seen them come a long way since the first Tyrannus especially. But before we get into that, I'll just talk real quick about the radio. I'm going to pick it up here and show you a couple of things about it. Form factor is very similar to the Horus X12. It fits in my hands really well. I really like the placement of the sticks. Now this one does not have, it's not the S, so I can't tilt the gimbals or rotate them, but still it feels very nice. The sticks are in a great place for me. All the switches are easy to get to. Nice solid feeling switches. I do like the flight mode buttons that are down here as opposed to the knob. I prefer the buttons. Just a personal thing. The trims are easy to locate. They're very, you're flying along, you need a little bit of elevator trim, it's right there. Aileron trim's the same thing. The adjustable pots center very nicely, and of course you've got sliders, one on each side, and they have a nice center detent as well. Something I was really pleased to see is if you fly DLGs, especially, I know anybody who has most likely modified their original Tyrannus to have a momentary button. Well, on the Tandem, they included these buttons for us. So while we're on the back of the radio, we'll go ahead and show you things back here. Radio bay, or battery bay, excuse me, 4,000 milliamp LiPo already in there. That charges through a USB-C connector. You also have the small expansion bay, and this cover, they don't mean for you to take it off real easy, but it does come off, trust me. So we'll leave that so I don't break it. Across the top here, you've got expansion ports for antennas, one on either side. If I can get my fingers out of the way here. There you go. And another one over here. Then you also have a headphone jack, USB jack, SD card, the DSC, which is your trainer cord, and then a programming port for S port, as well as the micro SD slot. There's also a couple of slots in this one that aren't populated for the micro HDMI for later versions and some other expansion stuff. So everything's really easily accessible. This radio actually charges through a USB-C port, and you got plenty of USB-C cables laying around if you're like me, so it's really easy to get her charged up and get her ready to go. One other unique feature are these hand bolsters, pads basically that snap on and off. They're hard plastic, as you can tell, but they actually have a nice texture on the outside. But they snap on and off to give you just a little bit more thickness if you want that in your radio. Make it easier to grip. I actually prefer these on mine. Again, it's personal preference. These back grips are nice. They're rubber, so if you don't want to use those, you've still got good grip on the radio. So these snap on and off really easy, so I would suggest if you grab one of these, try it both ways and see what you like best. I prefer those because they add just a little bit more thickness, and it feels better in my hand. Again, that's a personal preference item. But as you can see, this one came in the blue color. I really like the color. As far as the external features of the radio, when it comes out of the carrying case, it presents really well. It's a really impressive radio. So a couple other things, typical switch layout. You've got a momentary switch, if I can keep this thing in camera view, in the expected position, top right. You've got 3 position switches everywhere else, except for this shoulder switch up here, which is a 2 position. That one I typically use as an arm and disarm for my throttle safety for my electric and my wet fueled aircraft. This one, typically the momentary up here, you could use that as a trainer switch if you're flying something where you're buddy boxing somebody. What I like to do with this one is use it for telemetry callouts. So I just pull that switch and get whatever telemetry feedback that I want, be it, you know, voltage, altitude, runtime, whatever. It's just really convenient. Got a slider here. That one will likely be dedicated to volume usage for me. I always like to put one of my sliders on any of my FrSky radios for volume, or one of my potentiometers for volume. Having that one in the center, that's probably what that's going to end up being for me. But enough about that kind of stuff. Let's go ahead and power this thing up and get you guys a quick look at what the radio looks like, what the interface is. I do want to mention that you have two options here for controlling. You can use these wheels. You've got model, system, return, and telemetry, as well as a center button. Then this wheel spins and a center button. Also features a touch screen, which is a pretty nice feature. Power up is simple, just push and hold.
Welcome to Ethos. Throttle not idle. Switch warning. Failsafe not set.
And of course it tells you everything about the radio that's going on. As you heard her say, the throttle isn't at idle position. It tells you that it's at idle, and it'll actually show you on the graph. You can see. And that's because I've got the throttle, I've got it set up to tell me that, and it actually shows you that, okay, so the next thing I've got is I've got a switch warning. Switch A is not in the safe position, and you can select those positions. And then finally is a fail-safe warning, because I don't have it on a specific model right now. So to get through that, or any of these, you just hit any key to skip the warning. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to try to zoom in on the screen here a little bit, and give you guys a little bit better view of what it looks like when you're going through some of the menus. Okay. Sorry about all the extraneous noise. I am actually having to film this in my camper. Alright. So the screen will dim after a preset amount of time to help save on battery. You can touch anything on the screen and it'll highlight it. These are my timers right now. This is again a factory setting. You have the time of day shown here. You've got battery voltage up in this corner. You've got a signal strength indicator when you're actually bound up and hooked to a receiver. And then of course here you have a picture of the airplane, and in this case you can actually add your own photographs of your planes. You can see the slider in the center. The orange bar ties into our red slider at the bottom, giving you a visual representation of where it's at. So that's your home screen. If we go to the next screen, which is the model screen, or it's denoted by an airplane, you have edit model, flight modes, mixer, outputs, timers, trims, the RF system, and telemetry. Something I do want to mention about RF system is this radio features FrSky's 2.4 protocol, as well as their 900 megahertz protocol built in. It's pretty neat because you can actually bind up a 900 megahertz and a 2.4 receiver at the same time if you want to, or you can run either one of them independently. Really neat feature because it gives you a lot of power. You know, with one radio you don't have to have an external module if you want to do some long range stuff for 900 megahertz. Use it for FPV, or if you just want the solid reception offered by 900 megahertz, you can use that as well. I do want to mention that this radio is compatible with the legacy ACCST D16 mode protocol, so you don't have to get rid of all of your older FrSky receivers. And then the new protocol, which is Access 2.4 gig, the Access protocol, so it works with their latest 2.4 protocol as well as the 900 megahertz Access protocol. And you can run Access 2.4 at the same time as you run Access 900, which is pretty cool. They're saying up to 50 to 100 kilometer range with this thing in the 900 megahertz super low latency mode. 4 milliseconds end-to-end latency. That's just insane to me. I can't even begin to imagine anything that I would fly at those distances, but you do have it. What that really tells me is that I don't have to worry about flying a regular line of sight model, whether it's FPV or non-FPV. I can control it way further than I can see it, which is always a good thing. So anyway, let's go on to our next screen. You've got screen 1, which is a configurable screen, and that was our home screen. And right here gives you the option of a model bitmap, or you can change your widget so you can actually show other information. Of course, all of these timers that were down the side, you can change those widgets to display other things as well. And it's as simple as just hitting the change widget button. The widget asks you for a value, so you can choose whatever value you want. For example, model bitmap. Okay, we're going to leave it on value, and then we're going to go down here to source. I'm going to use the navigation wheel so I can keep my hands out of the screen, and you can just hit, choose whatever you want there. It's really cool that you're able to customize it. You can choose categories for flight mode. It's unbelievable what you can do with this thing. And of course, at any time you can pop the screen back to return. Over here on the final screen selection is settings. So this is where you would go in and do model select. Okay, and you tap up there, you can return. You've got a file manager, you've got alerts, your date and time, what you can set, your display adjustments, sound and vibration, battery, and hardware. Sound and vibration is pretty cool because you do have the option to select multiple languages. Let's see here. Let's go up here to the top. English is, of course, the default. You can do Chinese, FrSky, Dutch, French, several languages there to choose from. You can also adjust your main volume. The audio modes are changeable. You can do alarms only, default, which does your time, how much time in between your alarms. You can have often or always. So there's a lot of customization for the audio feedback, which is really nice because there are times that you just may not want the radio talking to you all the time. If you're just out sport flying or having, just having a good time with friends, you don't want the radio, interrupting your conversations on the flight line. So you can actually just, you can set them to alarms only, and it'll only tell you when you have an out of range alarm or low battery alarm or something like that you've set. Or you can choose the other more frequent options to give you more information. Next up, we have the vibration strength. So just like your cell phone has a silent alarm, this does the same thing with the haptic feedback. You can choose the strength of that vibration. You can also choose your vibration mode from alarms, default, often, and always. The next thing is your variometer, which is pretty cool. With the variometer, you can choose the volume of just the variometer as it compares to all the other audio features of the radio. You can choose your pitch at 0. You can also choose your max pitch, the repeat time. You can customize your variometer, which is pretty nice. That was available if you've used FrSky gear, especially with sailplanes. I'm sure you're familiar with that. It's really easy to get to these options here. So, and again, you can use the scroll wheel like I'm doing now, or you can just reach up and touch something. And there you go. Just select it, and then you can go back. Battery. This is pretty cool. It gives you your main voltage. It shows you your current main voltage. You can set a customizable low voltage point, your display voltage range, the RTC, your real-time clock, which is the backup battery in the radio. It gives you that voltage, and that's kind of handy because if you've ever had a computer radio where your backup battery inside the radio died, chances are you lost some data. This way you've got a really easy way to check the voltage of that without disassembling the radio and getting a meter in there. Not always the easiest thing to do, so I really appreciate having this feature. I've had a couple of radios in the past that I've let the internal battery has died on, and it's caused me no matter of heartache over getting everything set back up. So in digital display, you can turn off the digital display, and what that does is that puts a bar indicator up here rather than the battery voltage. I prefer reading the battery voltage because that's just how I am, but you can choose to have the cell phone style bar display if you prefer that. Hardware. This is pretty cool. So here you can do all of your calibrations. You can do analog sticks and your potentiometers. You can calibrate all those. You can do your gyro calibration. This thing has a built-in gyro, so if you tilt it left, right, front, back, it recognizes that, and you can actually map those movements into inputs to the radio. You could fly with that if you wanted to. It might be kind of hard, but then again, if you're used to using body English, it may help you out. Actually, where I think it would come in really handy is for different telemetry. And what they tell you to do in the calibration is you hold the radio as you normally would and click on the gyro calibration, and it sets that as your neutral point. Then when you tip the radio forward or toward yourself or left or right, it sees that as an input. So you could actually use that to call out separate pieces of telemetry if you wanted, versus using the switch, your shoulder switch up here, the momentary, like I've become accustomed to. In addition, you've got the switch middle delay detect. That's pretty handy. On these 3-position switches, if you set up a voice call out to let you know what each position is, if you go from, say this is your low rate at the top, and all the way down to your high rate, and you have 3 rates set up, low, middle, and high, you don't want to hear her call out that you're in middle rate when you're actually switching to high. So what you can do is set a delay right here in the switch middle detect delay, and if you don't linger in that middle position for at least that delay time, it won't announce that position. So it's really handy. Like I said, especially if you're going from low rate straight to high, or if you're going from 0 flaps to full flaps, or whatever flight condition you may be choosing. You can also tell it what kind of position, what kind of switches you have available, 3-position switches, and in what position, which location, which is really nice because you could actually move switches around or customize your switches to meet your needs. Say you wanted 2-position switches, you could easily pull this switch out, replace it with a 2-position, and then tell the radio, hey, this is a 2-position switch. So that's really handy, totally customizable in that aspect, and you know, it's as simple as unbolting the switch, unplugging it from inside the radio, putting in your replacement, and changing your setting here, and you're done. You also have the option on the back. The 2 switches on the back are listed as toggle switches, switch I and switch J, so you can change those if you wanted to. I can't see a reason personally I would do that. I would want them as a push button, a momentary style button like they are. But you would be able to change those if you felt the need to. Alright, sound and vibration, we covered all that. Display, that's a good one. You can choose your brightness. This thing will actually get really, really bright. It's well visible outdoors. I was quite impressed with the quality of the screen. The wake up for the screen, you can have it always on, so it never turns off your backlight. It's automatic, so when you touch a key, it turns on. You can have it come on the sticks or on the switches. I leave it on auto because that's the most natural way for me. I don't necessarily need to look at the screen. I don't want it full brightness all the time, although I haven't noticed a huge impact on battery life. Mainly I leave it on auto because if you night fly with this radio, you want it to drop back to dim so it doesn't distract you while you're night flying. But you have the option of turning it always on during the day, and it's a simple change. You know, it takes a couple of seconds to go in here and set it the way you want to. You can set your sleep time. Right now it defaults to 30 seconds. So you hit a key, it's on for 30 seconds. After 30 seconds of no input other than sticks or switches, it drops back to lower level brightness. You can have it shut down the LCD during sleep, which means it actually turns the LCD completely off. It doesn't just drop the backlight, it shuts it down completely, so that would further save battery. If you're doing long sailplane flights, that could be really helpful. If you're doing long sailplane flights, that could be really helpful to maximize your transmitter battery. Or if you were doing cross-country flights, something like that, where you wanted to make sure that you weren't going to run out of battery. You can also choose the style, which is pretty neat. You've got yellow on black, orange on black, black on white. So if I do black on white, you can see it changes everything. That's a really good visible scheme, especially outdoors. I've tried the yellow on black. That looks good. I actually, for personal preferences, I like the orange on black, which highlights your text that you're working with in orange with a black background, and then all of your inputs down this side are all in white. Let me tap that and see, you can see where it goes orange right there, and then once you select it, you're good to go. You can also change your language here from English to your other selections, so you can actually have your display in French if you choose. Pretty neat feature there for sure. Makes it definitely a worldwide radio. So in File Manager, you can go through and choose your files. You've got audio, bitmaps, models, system volume information, and radio bin. Your radio bin file is actually a system file that allows you to update the radio. You can find more information about that on FrSky's website. The update process is seamless. You actually copy a file over to the SD card, rename it as per their spec on the website, put the SD card in, turn the radio on, and it handles it for you. You don't have to hook it up to a computer to do the update. It's completely automatic, completely internal. It's almost foolproof. And then model select, when you add models in here, you'll see that you can choose them. And it's real simple. You just scroll through, tap the one you want, and you're done. As you can see, it's a really friendly radio. Easy to use, point and click interface, as well as having the wheels down here. So what I want to do now is I want to edit the model. And if you double click on it, it lets you edit it. So we're going to go into the configuration screen, basically. So you can choose your name, and if you tap just right, you can scroll through, or so what I want to do now is edit the name. So it's really simple. You just tap the name block, or you can hit the center button and then you just start scrolling. So let's just put in test. So you scroll through to uppercase, hit the center button, and then you just scroll through and find the letters you want. It's that simple. If you scroll to the right, it starts out with capitals and goes through to lowercase, then to numbers. If you scroll to the left, it runs through that backwards. Super simple. Picture. You can choose from a picture that you've uploaded. There are defaults on here. For the sake of the demonstration, we're just going to go with, let's just pick a good one here. Let's do extra, just because we like extras. Alright, model type, it asks you what kind of model you have. You can choose from airplane, glider, helicopter, multi-rotor, or other. Other basically opens it up to be used with pretty much anything. You could use it to control a ground-based vehicle if you wanted to, or a boat, or whatever. As you choose airplane, helicopter, multi-rotor, or glider, it does change some of the preset mixes in the radio to allow you some commonly used functionality. You do still have free mixes available, so you can set up any kind of mix you can imagine. For example, you wanted to mix throttle to rudder, for example. You're able to do that through the free mixers. Really simple process. For now, we're just going to choose an airplane. Ailerons, you can choose the number of channels for your ailerons. No ailerons, 1, 2, or 4 channels. So if you have a multi-servo wing, giant scale for example, where you have 2 aileron servos per wing, you roll down here to 4 channels, and you can select that. If you're setting up a small foamy, 1 channel ailerons, and you're done. Tail is traditional. It's what it defaults to. You can choose to none for your tail control, so you could actually do a flying wing, or you can choose a V-tail. Elevators, same thing. You can choose 1, 2, or 4 channels to output your elevator controls. Rudder, again, you have 1, 2, 3, or 4 channels for rudder, so you could actually do multiple rudders if you needed to, or gang servos. You've got flap option, your engine option, and then you can reset all the mixers once you're done if you needed to. So, real simple there. Alright, so see, it updated with the extra. Not the best image on the video here. It looks a lot better in person than it's coming through on this video. I think that's probably an artifact of trying to film a screen. It's just one of those things. You'll just have to take my word for it. I'll get you some good still pictures of what this looks like, but it's really impressive screen. So we're going to tap back into that again, and we're going to do edit model one more time. Alright, so you can see that we've got all that good stuff set up, what we need there. So we're going to go over here to the airplane screen, and we're going to go to flight modes. Here you can actually check multiple flight modes. So here, this is obviously really handy for sailplane guys in particular. You can have a launch, cruise, thermal, speed. You can set all those up and assign them to different switch conditions or whatever you want. Really handy feature. And the mixer, we were talking about that earlier. You've got, just like in a traditional mixer screen, see if we can get this where you guys can see it a little better. There we go. You can see that the name of the mix is ailerons and the source is aileron. Channel is 1. And this is actually your output channel. 1 through 6 is your output channel. Alright, you can see that the active condition for the aileron is always on, and as I move the aileron stick, you can see that moving. So it shows you exactly what's going on there. Same thing with elevators. I move the elevator, throttle. You can see the position of the throttle. Rudder, same thing. Now here's one that's interesting. Gyro axis is tied to flaps. So as I tilt the radio right and left, you can see that the flaps are actually controlled by the gyro. Get it back in the screen here. And that's not practical, but it's a good way to show you how the gyro axis works. So your active condition, always on. That would be controlled in your flight mode switch. There might be a time when you didn't want flaps available. In a sailplane or jet, for example, in speed mode, in a high-speed pass mode, you might want to disable your flaps in that particular flight mode so you didn't inadvertently hit them. So you can choose those conditions. Alright, your outputs. Output screen is exactly what it sounds like. It shows you what your mixes are. So you can see the throttle output is moving there, and it tells me the orange bar at the top is the input, the green bar at the bottom is the output. You can see the flaps. See that one moving down there as I tilt the radio. Elevator moving up there. Alright, and you got multiple screens here that you can play with, which is kind of cool. So you scroll through them and you can see all the channels that are available. And I'm going to go to the very end just to show you. Hopefully you can see this. If I can get it up here close enough. I don't know if you can make that out. That actually shows 64 channels available for both input and output. That's a lot of channels. Where you would actually use that is if you wanted to do some custom mixing and do outputs to a channel so you could see them and then mix those channels back into something else. Still, it's incredible to have 64 channels available to play with in your output. I don't know of many other radio systems that offer that. And then you hit the return key again. We'll go down here to timers. So here's your timer values. You've got timer 1. You can have a mode where they count up or count down. You can set your values, so you can have it start from 0 and count up. You could have it start at 30 seconds and count down. Those obviously are handy for an overall flight timer if you wanted to keep up with the total amount of flight time on an airframe, or if you wanted to know the time for that particular flight. Another feature that you would use these for, obviously, is if you're a sailplane guy and you fly LMR, you can set a 2-minute motor timer, so it'll count down from 2 minutes, and when you hit that 0, you got to pull your throttle out and start your actual flight. So you can have your active conditions, and you can tell it, you can reset your timers here. You can edit, add, copy, or clone, so you could actually clone all those over. Your reset, you could actually reset a timer based on a input, whether it be a switch or a tilt or whatever you chose. Trims, really handy. This actually lets you choose everything about your trim. So we start off with the very first one, which is our left horizontal, which would be the rudder trim. You can choose a specific trim mode for each individual trim. So for your rudder trim for your first flight, say you wanted a bigger step so you could get it trimmed out quicker, get it close to trim, and then go back later and actually touch it up and get it perfect. So for your first flight, you might go to coarse, or you can even go custom or do exponential. So the further with the exponential, the more trim you put in it, the more it starts to move. You can do extra fine, or you can even disable the trim if you wanted to. That would be handy on an electric model, especially for your throttle. You don't really need a throttle trim, so you can just turn that throttle trim off. It defaults to fine, of course. What's really neat that I think FrSky has done with ETHOS, I think is how they're saying it, you can choose extended trims per channel. That's really handy if you've used any of the other FrSky products with other software. Extended trims actually let you use more trim than's typically available. It'll give you the full throw of the servo to get your aircraft trimmed in. In other software, when you turn that on, it's a global condition. It affects every trim setting on the radio. With the FrSky Ethos software, you can actually choose it per flight control, which is pretty neat. You can also choose to have an independent trim per flight mode. Really handy, especially flying aircraft with flaps, ducted fans, that sort of thing, and sailplanes too. You can actually, you'll find occasionally that your trims may change. In speed mode in a sailplane, for example, you may need more or less elevator trim. You can actually have this be independent and follow each flight mode, so you can get each one trimmed out and leave them there rather than chasing trims every time you change modes. Same thing for your left vertical trim, which would be throttle in my case. You've got the same options, right vertical, right horizontal, and then you can actually turn on cross trim. So cross trim's really handy. There are times on a maiden flight when you do not have the ability to let go of that right stick. You've got a model that's either really fast, really touchy, you know, something's just not quite right about it, or you're not sure how it's going to react, and you don't feel comfortable letting go of that right stick to make any trims. You can actually move your trims to the other side of the radio, so you can take your left hand off and use your left trim, what would traditionally be the rudder trim. You can set it up to actually trim your aileron. Really handy feature. I've used that a couple of times in the past, and it's saved my bacon. It's a neat feature if you're used to it. If you're not, it may take a little getting used to. I would recommend trying it on something you're very comfortable with the first couple of times, so that way you can kind of, you know, wrap your head around what's going on. Because if you've been flying any length of time, you know, it's just natural to reach down and grab the trim right below the stick you're working with. At least it is for me. I have to force myself if I use the cross trim to remember, but usually I'll only do that for the first couple of flights until I get it dialed in to where it's stable enough that I can take my hand off the right stick and actually finalize my trim adjustments. But the nice thing is that they thought to include it, and you'll notice that that's a drop-down menu, so you don't even have to see it if you don't want to, which is really handy. If you don't want to mess with it, you don't have to. It's there if you want it. Under RF system, this is where you get into all the really cool stuff that makes this radio pretty unique. The owner registration ID, you can customize that, and that actually ties into how the radio talks to the receivers. Mine is just a random sequence of numbers, and I did reset the radio before the video because I wanted to show you everything about it without any of my custom touches. So you can actually set that to whatever you want. If you've got your RCGroups username, if you want to use the, you know, name of your favorite pet or a random string of numbers, you can put that to anything and that'll be unique to you. The internal module, here's where you decide what's going on with the internal module versus the external module. So the state, you can actually turn your internal module on and off. The type that you're using for this particular aircraft, you can choose between Access, ACCST, or D16 mode, which is the legacy FrSky protocol, and TD mode, which is Tandem. You can turn off the 2.4 gig or turn it on. You can choose which antenna to use for 2.4 gig. You can also choose whether or not you want to use the 900 megahertz on or off. Your model ID, which is your model memory number. Which channels you want to use, 1 through 8, 1 through 6, if you're running 16 channels with 2 receivers. Your range check, or your set is where you register the receiver to the radio. And that's kind of a unique feature with this one. You register receivers to the radio, and then once you do that, to bind them, all you have to do is click bind in here. You don't have to do anything else to the receiver. Really handy because you only have to do it one time. You can do that outside of the airplane. If you ever needed to rebind, you can do that as well. And of course you can access range check, which turns down the internal power of the radio and lets you conduct a range check to make sure that everything's functioning like it should. Then of course you'll see over here you've got an RX1, which is your receiver number. And then you can bind, set, and reset that. RX2, RX3, failsafe, this is where you'll set your failsafe settings. You can make it hold, which would be hold your last input. You can do a custom failsafe where if you wanted to drop your throttle to 0, give it a little bit of up aileron or up elevator rather, and left aileron so it would have a gentle circle to descend. Or you can choose no pulses if you're using a flight controller that detects the loss of pulse and goes into a preset failsafe action like a GPS return to home. You can set that here, or you can actually still set yourself failsafe on a receiver. Same options are available for the external module. And it actually asks you what type of module you're using. Is it an XJT Lite or is it an R9M? Or you can do PPM output as well. Really handy if you've got some external modules hanging around. If you're using the XJT Lite, you can choose the different protocols between long range, the old D protocol, or you can use D16 protocol. Again, for the external module, you can set your model ID, your channel range, all the same sort of stuff. So really easy to get into all this. That's one of the things that I was really impressed with Ethos, is how easy and user-friendly the operating system is. You don't have to read a manual to figure this out. You can go through it, and if you've ever programmed any manufacturer radio, this stuff's going to pretty much make sense to you. And then finally you have the telemetry setup. This is really cool. you go down here and turn on new sensors, and it will automatically detect new sensors when you turn on discover new sensors. It will tell you what you're getting. Like for example, you can see the SWR for the 2.4 gig system, and it tells you the source. It's coming from the internal module. SWR for 900, RSSI for 900, the receive signal for 900, the receiver battery for 900. You've got all the options available right there. Those are the default ones, and of course if you plug in any telemetry models in your FrSky receivers, those will populate as soon as you turn on discover new sensors. So you can still use the variometer, you can use your battery sensors, you can use airspeed sensors, you can use any array of any of the FrSky existing sensors, S-port sensors that are available. So you still have all the functionality that we've come to know and love from FrSky. You go a little further to the next screen, you've got a checklist. You can actually ask it to pop this up and do a pre-flight check for you. So throttle check, it makes sure you can set your percentage. This one's set to negative 95%, which means the throttle needs to be almost at 0 before it will actually start working. You can do a fail-safe check, you can turn that on or off, as you saw when we turned the radio on. Your potentiometers, your sliders, switches, you can set all of this per model. So you could actually have different switch setups depending on what model you're flying, and it will alert you that, hey, your switches aren't right when you change into that model or boot the radio up, and it'll give you a chance to correct that, or it makes you acknowledge that you know they're not right and push a button to bypass it before it actually starts transmitting. Logic switches. These are exactly what you think they are. It's if-then conditions. If this happens, then do this. Same thing that you've experienced in several other pieces of software that are out there for radios. Very simple to set. You've got the name, so you can choose the name obviously for your logic switch. You can choose the function, whether you want it normal or inverted. You can choose A is approximately equal to X. You've got all of your Boolean operators here. So if you've ever done any programming with your radio to set up anything custom, these will look familiar to you. Of course, you can choose your source, the value that you want, whether or not it's an active condition, how long to delay once the active condition becomes active, your delay before inactivity, and the minimum duration that it's active before it actually fires off that logic switch. Alright, so the next thing, special functions. Special functions, action, reset. You can choose screenshots, so you can actually take a screenshot of whatever's going on the radio. You can have it set a failsafe, play a tracker, play a value. For this one, we'll choose play a value. We're going to enable it, which means we're making this one active. The switch, and this is where I was talking about being able to use your momentary switch. And you'll notice I just pulled that momentary switch and it went to it immediately. It says switch positions S up as I hold it. So if I hit the button again and return out of that, then you'll see that the switch position on the screen has updated. And you can, I don't know if you can see that it's switching from green to, or red to green. Red is the off condition up there in the corner, and as I pull it, it goes green, which tells me it's active. So my next option is to set the value. And here I can choose, do I want it to be an analog value, a switch, a trim? Do I want it to activate a logic switch, timers, telemetry, system value? So we'll use system value for this one. I'm going to choose main voltage, which gives me the voltage of the radio. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to return out of that, and then finally we have the option to repeat it. We can repeat it once or repeat every 2 seconds, 1 second, whatever interval you choose. I'm going to choose once, and then we're going to try it and see what happens.
8.1 volts.
And you can see simply by pulling switch SH,
8.1 volts.
it tells me what the voltage of the radio is. That's where I would normally set my receiver voltage or my flight pack voltage, as well as any other conditions I want to know about the airplane. If I'm flying a sailplane, I put my variometer on there, my altitude call out actually, so it will tell me, you know, what my current altitude is. You can have it tell you anything, like I said, flight pack voltage, any other telemetry sensor you want. You can have it tell you the position of the sticks, even if you want to do that. So really handy. Special functions are where you also can set up your throttle kills. You can have it talk to you when you move your switch from low rate to high rate. That's where you would set all that sort of stuff up. Alright, curves. That's a big one. Curves is probably the one you're going to use the most. This is where you would set up exponential. Curves will do just about everything for you. First, you would want to name your curve. We're just going to name this one A, just to demonstrate it, and then type expo, function, or custom. So say we wanted an expo curve. Okay, this is curve 1. So the weight is 100% currently. I'm going to move that weight down and you can see what's happening. It's limiting the amount of travel for this expo curve. So you could actually have expo and low rate on one switch if you wanted to. Okay, you can offset your curve from center. Really handy for offsetting a curve. Will help you if you're using multiple servos to control different surfaces on your plane, like multiple aileron servos. You can use the offset to kind of help get those centered up a little bit. Makes it easier. And then of course your expo amount, since we chose an expo curve, we can do 100% expo, which is insane. You can dial it back to negative expo if you want to, and all your curves work pretty much the same. The default for your expo is 40%. Of course you can change that as you see fit. You can do a function curve or custom curve. Custom curves let you choose the number of points. This is where you would, or this is where I set up flaps typically. I typically do a 3-point curve for my flaps just because it's really easy. I don't necessarily smooth the flap curve because I'm looking for specific settings rather than making a smooth transition between them, because I'm setting up flaps typically on a 3-position switch. You go in here to points configuration and you can see you have X, Y options on your screen, X and Y coordinates. If you turn on easy mode, it just lets you set the X coordinate. So we're going to go ahead and alter this X coordinate. Alright, so say we want full flap, which would be negative 100% in this case. We want mid flap, which is going to be negative 50%. Okay, if I can get 50 here without overrunning. And then my high rate, or my highest flap setting would be 0. Okay, so that would put my flaps at neutral. So when I assign this, use this curve 1, I can assign that to a switch to activate the flaps, and this curve is actually how I would tune my flaps. Makes it really simple to set up. And that's how a custom curve works. And then of course next you've got your trainer set up, so you can choose your trainer mode. You can have this be a master or a slave. If it's a master, you can link between cable or wireless, so you can use a wireless trainer feature if you want to. Your active condition, you can set your category as always on or switch positions, function switches, logic positions. You'd probably want to set that to a function switch, and then you choose your switch that you wanted. And then you can actually, from there, you can choose how much rudder, aileron, elevator, and throttle you want to give to your student. So if you just want your student to work on maintaining altitude, you can set all 3 of the other conditions to 0 and set the elevator to 100%. And when you pull your trainer switch, you're flying everything except the elevator. That gives the student one control to focus on. You can also change if you want it to replace or add to your controls. So if you've got somebody who's never flown before, you could choose the add mode for all 4 channels, and then while they're flying, you can fly along with them and kind of help them out, you know, for those first couple of awkward flights when they're trying to figure out what all the sticks do. Of course, replace does exactly that. When you pull the switch, it replaces your inputs on the master radio with the inputs of your student's radio. So pretty neat there that you can choose that for your 4 main flight controls. Again, rudder, elevator, throttle, and aileron. And then your final screen in here is your device configuration. This is where you look at all of the device IDs, firmware version, and the data rate for any telemetry sensors you have hooked up. Airspeed, current, speed controls. FrSky has a line of speed controls. The gas suite for the guys that fly gas planes. Your GPS for the GPS receiver, LiPo voltage. Everything that you want to know is in here. So pretty cool that you've got all these options. Variometer, it gives you your altitude data rate, tells you how fast it's sending the data rate back. Gives you, if those are hooked up, it gives you your firmware version. You know, you can do the SXR receivers, the stabilizing receivers. You can tell it how you want to set that up. The wing type of the airplane, the mounting type, whether it's level, whatever. ailerons are inverted, if whatever surfaces you may have that are inverted, you can set all that in here without having to program it from a different way. You can also calibrate those receivers. So you can do pretty much everything that FrSky offers through the radio without having to hook up to anything else or do any other kind of special programming. So as you can see, the Tandem X20 is an amazing piece of hardware. Absolutely beautiful radio. These switches down here, I didn't talk about those much, that you could use for your flight modes. They actually light up to show you which one's active. Everything is really smooth. The gimbals feel amazing. The tension, normally that's the first thing I have to do to a radio when I take it out of the box, is I have to adjust the gimbal tension because I like a heavier set of sticks. These feel great to me straight out of the box. The springs are good. The tension is constant through the movement. They're very positive. They just feel really good. They've done a heck of a job with these gimbals. Of course, they're Hall effect gimbals, so the precision that we've become to know and love is still there. The stick ends on these are, I left the pointed ones on. You do have a couple other options of stick ends that you'll see pictures of in the review. I'm just blown away, with how good the radio feels. The weight. Now, I've been flying a Horus X12 for quite a while. The X12 is a heavy radio. This thing is half the weight of the X12. But it still gives me the same form factor, and I like a bigger radio with things spread out just because it's more comfortable for me. The tiny radios just don't fit my hands. This thing it's awesome. Very impressed with it. Again, the screen is unbelievably clear, really bright. It's an 800 by 480 resolution screen, and of course, like I said, it's a touch screen, which is really nice because you can manually go through with the screen, or if you want to, you can always use your navigation wheel and your buttons down here, and you do have center buttons as well for selecting. This radio, if you're interested in the latest FrSky radio, I would strongly suggest you take a look at the Tandem X20 and the whole Tandem line. I feel like that FrSky has gone above and beyond with what I have come to expect from them, both in quality of the hardware as well as ease of use. I'm not going to lie, with all the other FrSky radios I've had, one of the first things I did was put OpenTX on them because I really liked the features that OpenTX had available, the free mixers, the layout of the programming. It just clicked for me and it made sense. Ethos, the latest operating system that's featured on the Tandem X20, it nails all of those features that I wanted straight out of the box. I do not feel the need for OpenTX while using this radio. It's that good. I have flown with it. Like I said, I reset it for this video. I wanted to get it out in the field, use it a little bit, get accustomed to it, see how capable it was, and compare it to the radios that I've been flying. I really like it. It's gonna replace my X12. My Horus is gonna go to a standby slot now. It'll be my backup radio, and the X20 is going to be my main radio. It's simply that good between hardware and software. I really think they've knocked it out of the park. And of course, there's going to be some updates coming. There always is. First generation radio, first generation software. They've got other things going on. They are planning on supporting Lua scripts. That's in progress right now. Multi-language, of course, is already there. You can add your own pictures. I have not played around with adding my own audio files yet, but that can be done as well. If you have some custom audio callouts that you'd like to do, you can do that. The fact that the momentary buttons on the back are already there, that's really nice. I don't fly DLG as much anymore, but I have gotten used to having that button on the back of my Tyrannus, which is my DLG radio. I use it for several other things that I've used that radio for, and not having to mod the Tandem X20 is really nice, and the fact that I actually have two buttons back there from the factory is handy, because that what I did on my Tyrannus is I actually just took switch SH, which is the momentary, and paralleled it with a button on the back. Now I've got two totally separate available buttons back there that I can use for whatever I choose. Those likely will be additional telemetry callouts as I get more models into the radio. Trying to think if there's anything else you guys really need to know, other than I would strongly suggest getting your hands on one of these. If you're a FrSky user, it's worth spending the time and the money to grab one of these radios. They really are that impressive. just unbelievable. I know I sound like I'm a FrSky fanboy, but I'm telling you, this radio, you know, having come from the very first generation Tyrannus through the Horus and finally to this one, I'm really blown away with where they've come from and what they've managed to pack into this radio. So if you're interested in it, I suggest looking at it. There are several other threads here on RCGroups that can give you even more information, where you can see day-to-day users. You can see what's going on, catch up with the FrSky guys even in some of those threads, and ask your questions and find out what other people think, not just my opinion. I think you're going to find that by and large, folks are really enjoying this radio. So anyway, hope you enjoyed that, and I hope it was of some use to you. If you decide to pick up your own X20, let us know. We really appreciate your time. Thank you for taking a few minutes out of your day to watch this video, and let me know what you think of your X20.